Welcome to episode 15 of Meant to Win podcast with David Schnurman, the CEO of Lawline and the president of the Entrepreneurs Organization of New York. He's also an author of The Fast Forward Mindset, How to Be More Fearless and Focused to Accelerate Your Success. David, thanks for being here.
Jeff, David, thank you for having me.
So David, you started Lawline in your first year of law school. Is that correct?
Correct. So the story behind that is I had started a TV show. It was actually my second year of law school. I started a TV show then because I had two really bad experiences in law school that really sort of jaded me. Like I worked for 5 years before I went to law school in different sales jobs. And I realized being a lawyer, for me, it was sort of the same thing as being a salesperson, except then you also had to practice law. And I've always had it. My childhood dream was to be an entrepreneur. I would literally be in like Staples when I was a kid, like pretending I was buying all the office supplies. And so my second year of law school, because of circumstances, I ended up starting a TV show. This is before podcasting, before YouTube. It was 2006, so YouTube just started. It was on cable, Manhattan Neighborhood Network. It was a free access that anybody in Manhattan can have a cable television show.
Wow.
And I started interviewing entrepreneurs, and my goal was to figure out, I knew if I love listening to people's stories, and I knew other people did too. And my goal was to figure out how to start a business within 1 year or less. And luckily, not only did it lead to opportunities, but it led to me taking Lawline and building it up by my third year of law school so I can hit the ground running after I took the bar.
Right on. And just for our audience, what is Lawline? What's the primary offering of Lawline?
So Lawline, we are the largest provider of online continuing legal education for attorneys. There's about 1 million attorneys in the country right now, and it's mandatory for 800,000 of them to take continuing education courses on a regular basis so they can keep up with the law and any different changes. And we make it so easy for them to do it. We have an app, we're like the Audible for law. We have an online course center, and we have about 1,500 hours of content. And so what we do is we provide the mid-price option at the highest value. So there's higher priced options out there and lower price, but nobody has the amount of content and the quality and the platform that we have. And luckily, that's why we've been able to really grow and service the community the way we have.
Yeah, and I think it should be mentioned, and correct me if I'm wrong on these numbers, but my understanding is you're serving over 150,000 of those 800,000 attorneys that have to have.
And just to give a little bit of context to that number, that's over a 3-year period generally. So we have active subscribers that are in the 30 to 50,000 range, but in terms of, because many reporting cycles are over 3 years. So for example, California, where you two are from, the attorney needs to take, I think it's 35 hours every 3 years. So somebody might come on in 2010, we might not see them again, unfortunately, to 2014. And so over a 3-year period, we serve that. So it's not every year, at least yet.
Okay. And what was the idea behind that? I mean, how did not a lot of people start a business in law school?
So your father and son team, so you'll appreciate this. So in 1990, I'll go even further back. In 1985, my dad was the first TV show interviewing attorneys. It was on a PBS station in New York. It was called Lawline. And he interviewed attorneys, and he thought he was way ahead of his time. He thought it was going to be his way of getting clients. And it didn't really lead for maybe 10 years at least to getting clients, but it built his credibility. And then in 1999, he retired, but he was a personal attorney for 40 years. He taught a lot at bar associations. And in 1999, during the dot-com era where things were like pets.com and everything was going through the roof, him and his partner decided to create Lawline, turn Lawline into an online education company. And what happened was a year later, the market crashed and everything stopped. And my dad never really went back to he actually stopped the company, but kept the website up with like 10 courses on it. Maybe it did like, I don't know, $1,000 a month in revenue, and just sort of like just sat there for 6 or 7 years. And so when I was in law school and I was interviewing these entrepreneurs and I decided, let me interview lawyers, I said, you know what I can do is I actually take the name Lawline and say I've been around since 1999. And all of a sudden, overnight, we were around for 7 years. And that's the story of Lawline.
Brilliant.
And so my dad now is my biggest cheerleader because he gets to see where we were and what we built. And it's just the best feeling to have your father on your side throughout.
Well, and from the father side, I can say it's a great feeling, to have a son step up and do something that's meaningful for you that also relates to something, you're doing. So it's like, it's easy to be a cheerleader. That's simple. It's great.
It ended up being the best case scenario because all he ever wanted me to do was be a personal injury attorney and work for him and his firm. I knew, one, I could never work for him. It just wouldn't work. And number two, I never wanted to be in personal injury. So now I've actually built something that he's part owner of because of he started the concept. And now it's just like, shoot it through the moon. And so it's like, it's a double win all over.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And along the way, you wrote your book, The Fast Forward Mindset, How to Be More Fearless and Focused to Accelerate Your Success. Got to get the name in there again.
Thank you.
Yeah. And how did that come about, writing that book?
So it started 2 years ago. Again, another father-son story.
Oh.
I turned 40. And as you do on milestone birthdays, I was reflecting on my life. And I said this line to my dad. I go, look, Dad, my 20-year-old self would definitely be proud of everything I've achieved. But my 20-year-old self, if I'm going to be honest, would have thought by now my business would be bigger and I would be more well-known. My dad's like, are you kidding me? Like, do you know how many people would want to have what you have and, achieve what you achieve? And so we kept this, the conversation kept going. And I realized my issue was not that I wanted a bigger business or more fame or whatever. It was, what I realized was I wanted to have a bigger impact on the world around me. And I wanted to do it faster because once you're 40, you have 20 years of work experience behind you. And you realize 9/11 for me feels like yesterday, but it's almost 20 years ago. And you can start thinking more long term. And what happened was I had felt probably from 35 to 40, we had a lot of success and we were doing well. I just got stuck in my comfort zone. Nothing wrong with that because I was comfortable, but my head was telling me I want to have more impact on the world around me. And so the fast forward mindset was a framework I made for myself that for the next 20 years, so when I'm 60, I can be more fearless and focused to fast forward impact. And I can have a conversation with my dad when he's 92 and I'm 60 and not say that, instead say my 40-year-old self would be so proud of how much impact I've had over the past 20 years. And so that was the sort of the framework of the book. And the way the book came from actually not all my successes. It came from the two main things, the mental walls that always were in my way. When I journal, and I've journaled for 11 years. I looked at all my journals. It was either lack of confidence in myself or lack of focus. And so so after doing all this work and working with coaches, it's the fast forward is a 3-step framework on how to be more fearless and focused to accelerate your success. And I'm the first customer of my book. So if I won't refer to it in 20 years, I can't expect anyone else to buy it. Hopefully I will.
That's fascinating. A lot of people write a book because they're trying to sell their business. They're trying to sell their ideas. They're trying to teach someone else something. It sounds like you were kind of on a mission for yourself instead of that.
Well, it's the reality that most books only sell 215 copies. So I have delusions of grandeur. I think it will sell 1 million copies. May take 10 years to get there. So, but I also accepted the worst case scenario, which is, my family and friends and a couple other people. And so if it's not for my own growth, then that was part of it. I couldn't have stopped. It was, regardless of any of that, it was in me, and I had to write this book, and I think I have 17 more behind it.
Oh, well, speaking about the next 20 years, I noticed some of your posts on LinkedIn and elsewhere. One of them was you're giving out plastics for a week. Or you gave up plastics for a week. Is that true?
So one of the things I did when I started figuring out, I wanted to fast forward my impact, I had to figure out, where do I want to spend the next 20, 30 years of my life to do that so I can have some direction, because we all want that direction. And there's 3 areas that pretty quickly came to my area that if I spent the next 30 years of my life trying to have a bigger impact, I would have no regrets, even if I couldn't do what I thought I wanted to do. And that was sustainability, education, and personal improvement, personal development. And one of the areas for sustainability is reducing plastic. And so I have started to slowly figure out ways to reduce my plastic footprint. And I'm not as successful as I want to be, but I have them in my mindset now. And specifically, though, I'm geared on creating entrepreneurial-based companies in these three areas. So it's entrepreneur focused, and that's so energizing to me because I feel like I have my direction, my purpose in life, and it's cool.
And why
Talk to me about the education piece. What are you doing in the education piece outside of Lawline?
Yeah, so so it's really specific in like 2 to 3 areas. I want to disrupt education. Number one, higher learning, way too expensive. We see what just happened with the college scandals. It does not have to be the cost that it is. It's not sustainable. The debt on tuition is not sustainable. You can get the same education for almost nothing now. And so I want to keep creating tools to allow to bring it out to the masses so everybody can continuing learning for lifelong learning. So reduce the cost of higher education. Secondly, which I just mentioned which relates to Lawline, is continuing education or lifelong learning is my passion, and everybody should be doing it in one form or another and keep putting resources out there. And third goes to my children is I believe in school systems now it's changing, but there's a lot that needs to do to actually prepare our children for the future of automation, when a lot of the jobs that exist today won't exist tomorrow, and with also the ability to be self-confident in themselves and to know how to plan and to think long-term. So I'm actually doing a TEDx in May 18th at a middle school in Virginia on that topic.
Very cool. Yeah. The automation seems to be like a big topic these days. People talking about in the future, there's not going to be any jobs for anybody. I tend to wonder, how much weight does that have? And is the human race capable of innovating past that when that time finally comes?
So have you ever heard there's something called a resource-based economy? Have you heard that term?
I've heard the term, but I can't remember exactly what it means.
So it's essentially, it's a division of this. His name was Jacques Cousteau. I forget his name exactly, but it's essentially a day where you don't need, there's no money. It's all based on who can think. It's a thinking-based economy and a resource. It's not based on the basic needs of like food, shelter, water. And so there's no question. Think about Uber and drivers. There will be a time, hopefully, in our lifetimes, where there will be automated driving. Think about all those jobs right there. Think about all the jobs that have already gone away. It's just we have to change the opportunities that exist. Think about web development. That didn't really exist, for forever. And now web developers are one of the highest paid professions. Eventually it won't be. And so there's just so much opportunity to transform, especially in sustainability, in personal development, in lifelong learning, and in all those areas. Those are the opportunities. To me, sustainability is you're a futurist. If you're, look at what is it called? There's Beyond Meat and there's Impossible Burger. It just got $300 million in funding.
Yeah,
and it's everywhere now, and it tastes good. I'm a vegetarian, so I'm happy. It tastes good, and I think the factory farming system that we have right now is not sustainable. It's just not. So we just always got to be thinking ahead for the future.
Yeah, I've never tried an Impossible Burger, but I've heard they're amazing. Some friends told me they're really good.
They're impossible.
What are they made of? I've never even heard of it.
It's like different types of plant-based proteins, but the way they engineer them, it looks and tastes just like meat. It's not like a traditional veggie burger. Google it after this. You'll see it's everywhere. They've gotten hundreds of $millions in funding. They're bigger than sliced bread.
They're plant-based zombie burgers, Dad.
Ooh, that's just right. All right, I like it. Now I'm all in. Hey, I'm curious, David, you talk about the education piece, and I really relate to one of the things you mentioned about teaching kids how to organize, how to focus, those types of things. And Jeff and I have talked about, eventually we've got Dave's Charm School with soft skills training. I mean, what would education look like if we actually taught kids how to work together and understand their natural strengths and what drives them and how to handle conflict and teamwork and all these things and how to communicate? Be quite different. I'm curious about another piece. If you're talking about really thinking of the future, and maybe I'm going down a tangent and Jeff's going to squash me here, but I'm kind of curious for education. One of the core tenets of our country is that we educate our children about how the republic works, how our country works, so they can carry it on and what it looks like to be a responsible citizen. Do you think that needs to be part of the education system at all again, or if it ever was? Because it seems to be kind of lost as we're moving forward. And,
my whole thing is less about the content per se, but in the way that it's taught. So as an example, my son is 10 years old. He watches more educational videos on YouTube. He probably knows more about America than most people, because he'll just watch all these really high energy guys, I forget their names right now, who do American history on YouTube, and it's entertainment, but it's also educational. So you've seen these things on like Jimmy Kimmel and all these things. They go around and they ask people like basic fundamental questions of our country, and nobody has any idea.
Yeah.
Like, it's already been lost on most people. And so that's, one of the challenges. It's, even if it's taught in school, doesn't mean you're going to absorb it or do anything with it. So I think it's all about context. And certainly, look, there's a lot of change happening, and politics is a nasty place right now. And so it's really important to understand where we were to help know, potentially where we're going. And,
David,
I'd
love to hear who that is, if you can send it off.
Which is?
Who your son watches that's entertaining on the
I know for sure. I'll tell you after.
I was just about to say, I think is it John Green and Crash Course?
Yep. Crash Course.
The Crash Course series. Yeah. It's great. They have a bunch of playlists on Crash Course US History. I'm looking at it right now. Crash Course US History. World.
I got to check that out.
And there's a lot. He's amazing. And there's a lot of others that Josh just knows facts about more than you can imagine. My daughter watches videos on slime, and she just makes slime while watching people do slime. And it's just, for her, it's almost like relaxing. And it's so cool to see that. And she also, there's this app, I don't know if you guys have young kids, it's called TikTok, which used to be Musical.ly. Yeah. And my daughter has a private account, so it's only for her friends. She is so talented on creating these quick music videos on there. And if there's a lot of schools out there that actually are based on like teamwork and building a business and entrepreneur things. And if you're doing something for a cause, you're gonna be motivated to learn how to do it versus, having to read a book like that you don't want to.
Well, I love what you say about context too. I remember 20, 30 years ago, I was on a curriculum committee with our local school district, and I was the only parent, and there were like 30 teachers. And I'll never forget one of the comments that a PE instructor made. They were talking about, this was a PE health curriculum type of thing. And one of the teachers said, we get the kids for 6 weeks. It's really not going to mean anything.
Yeah.
The only way this would ever have impact is if we took this content and then wove it into like math. If you eat this many calories a day, this is what'll happen. Or if you eat this, and then wove it into some history stuff and wove it into science where there's, if you weave it in so it can be applied, then they'll remember it better.
And there's a lot of schools that are now being started. So I want to start a school someday, and I'm looking into it in the next few years to see if it's possible. And there's something called Acton Academy that is really great. The Blue Man Group have created a school in Manhattan called the Blue School. WeWork has a school that it's there, and these are very progressive and focused on more the experience and team environments and individual sort of building discipline, as well as the core concept. So So it's happening, and I want to be part of the process over the next 30 years.
I feel like school in 30 years is just going to be, you watch some videos online, you do some worksheets, and then there's a validated test after, a semester of work that somebody actually proves, you have to prove that you learned something.
No, so that's today. 30 years from today, it's a hologram type situation.
It's going to plug into our brain.
I'm not kidding. That's already happening. So video online probably doesn't even make sense in 30 years. Whatever. It just, the thought of online, to me, it's just right there. So we'll see. Hopefully we'll all be around talking about it.
This is going to be a hologram in the future.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So you're going to test that on your employees first, David? Is that what you're going to do?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, David, I wanted to dive into those three things that you mentioned about your book, because I thought those were pretty interesting. Just looking to the future and also developing yourself. It seems like pretty universal things that anybody can do.
So the three things, remind me, you're talking about my three areas that I want to focus on, or the three steps of the book?
The three areas you wanted to focus on, the three things you mentioned.
Yeah. So right now, one of the things, so the book, there's three steps in the book. It's take action, nip fear in the bud. NIP is an acronym for not alone, I'll get through it and play the part. And the third one is find your focus. And one of the things that I've learned over the years is you can't do everything at once, right? And so right now, my big energy and focus over the next 6 to 12 months is in the personal development space. In addition to my company, which I'm the visionary, so I'm not as involved in the day-to-day, but I'm involved in moving it forward. And so the next 6 to 12 months, it's going to be spreading the impact in personal development. So that's the third area. So it's helping people fast forward their impact is really that's always been my North Star. That's why I'm president of EO. It's why I started a TV show in law school interviewing entrepreneurs. It's why I'm here today. I just love sharing knowledge that I have because more people, and only 5% of people read books. So you got to figure out how to get the messages. It's like the cliche thing, but it's just, there's some people who are like this, and I'm sure you guys are too. I want people to live to their potential, and I want to help them do that. And that's what drives me. That drives everything I do.
And from starting Lawline, as an entrepreneur and being involved in the Entrepreneurs Organization, do you have any advice for entrepreneurs and leaders who are trying to navigate this world of constantly changing technology and moving into the future?
2 words: not alone. Everybody's going through this at the same time. And so every struggle that you're feeling, everything that you're going through, we're all navigating through the same thing at the same time. So sometimes you feel like when you're trying to figure out your next step, it's the hardest thing in the world. And it's just knowing that every successful person has gone through what you're going through, just sort of sometimes helps get you out of that emotional fear that you have to want you to be comfortable again. And so I constantly tell myself, I'm not alone in doing, podcasts and messing up. I'm not alone, not that I messed up, but I'm not alone in publishing a book and not sure how to promote it the right way. I'm not alone in everything that I'm doing. In August, I'm moving to Barcelona for a year, and I'm not alone with my family. And there's people before me who did it, and there's going to be people after me, but it's all the things I constantly repeat to myself.
So why are you doing that?
Because I want to fast forward the impact of my children to explore the world. So they were in 5th grade. They were going to middle school next year. So they were applying to new schools anyway. And we decided to apply to schools in Barcelona because I know people who've done it. In addition, there's opportunities for Lawline to expand into Europe. And so we combined the two and we applied and they got in. And then we had to make a decision. We've been talking about this for 5 years. Are we either going to do it or not? And ultimately, we made the decision to move forward. And one of the reasons was because of the book, trying to eat my own dog food on things that I say you need to do. And so looking back, and it was either now or in 20 years from now, right? Because you can't do once the kids start school and all that stuff. And so we decided to take the plunge and do it.
Why Barcelona?
3 reasons. One, my wife lived in Spain for a little bit during college and loved it. We visited Barcelona about 5 years ago with our twins at the time and another family, and we really loved it there. And third, Entrepreneurs Organization. There's a couple members who've actually gone there and lived there, and there's a chapter there. So I had it made it easier for me to know exactly what school to go to and what process to take. And everything in Europe and the climate is perfect, right? So everything in Europe is about 2 hours away. And it's actually, there's a very big legal entrepreneur tech hub there as well.
Interesting.
Really?
Interesting. Cool.
Well, I hope you like soccer.
Sure. I'm not a sports guy in general, but certainly I will. They have the biggest sports stadium, I think, or one of the biggest in Europe. So I will definitely be there.
Yeah. Cool. Well, David, it's been great to have you on. Dad, did you have any further questions for David?
Yeah, I got some questions. So I'm curious, David. So you mentioned the way you worded it is you're still the visionary of the company. You're still helping it drive forward. Can you give some practical tips to leaders on how you do that? How you kind of step back and you put the structure in place for a group of people to basically run with your baby and make it work, although you're still involved?
Yep. Great question, Dave, because it didn't happen overnight. So in 2015, or 2014 or so, I had a low moment in my business, which I've had many. And the book is about many of the low moments. And I just I went in 6 years, I had 3 different COOs. And it was my third COO, and I realized things weren't working out. And every time I had to rebuild, and it was just so de-energizing for me. And I just said to myself, I can't keep doing this. There's got to be a better way. And at that time, we read the book Scaling Up, and somebody recommended, they have coaches who work with you from that book, hiring a coach. Because I tried to implement it 6 years earlier, the book Rockefeller Habits on my own, didn't work. So we hired Mark Green as our coach. And at that time, we didn't even have an executive team. And he said, who are the best learners in your company? I said, these people. He brings them in a room. Didn't even tell me he was going to say this. He goes, you are now the new Lawline executive team. I said, cool. And so over the next 3 years, he built systems in place that were all in the book: huddles, quarterly priorities, 3-year strategies, 1-year annual initiatives, every coaching sessions weekly with everybody, things we never did. And I didn't realize until that time what we were running on and up until that time was passion. We weren't really focused as a business.
Yeah.
So over the next 3 years, we built structure. But again, about last year, I started to feel that uncomfortable feeling like something needed to change again. And there's a book called Rocket Fuel. Are you familiar with it?
I have heard of it, but I haven't read it.
Are you familiar with the book Traction?
Yeah.
So Gino Wickham is the same one who wrote Rocket Fuel.
Okay.
And Vern Harnish, do you know Scaling Up? The book Scaling Up? So first of all, let me just give a plug to myself for a second. I'm super proud that Gino and Vern both gave endorsements for my book. And it means the world to me based on how much their books have had in the entrepreneurial community. But when they read the book, they were like, oh my God, this is exactly what entrepreneurs should read. So that was my plug. So I was having struggles with the leadership team. Like, I can only get them so far. I felt like I wasn't doing a good job because I was doing coaching with them. And my friend, who's a mentor to me, he said, oh, you have the classic visionary integrator problem. I go, the what problem? He said the VI problem. I'm like, the VI what? And he sent me a 4-minute video. And the book Rocket Fuel talks about how every business needs a visionary and an integrator. And like Walt Disney and his brother are the perfect combination of that. Walt got all the claim, but Roy is actually the one who did all the day-to-day. Essentially, the visionary and the integrator, and it talks about why so many of those COO relationships in the past didn't work, and all of them spoke to me. And what I realized was, when I read the book, for my entire career, I thought there was something wrong with me. It was almost like I've gone to 15 doctors, and they all told me they can't figure out what's wrong with me, but there's something there. Then finally, I saw a specialist. He goes, there's nothing wrong with you. You're just a visionary. I don't like holding people accountable. I don't like details. I have a million ideas, and I want to do them all at the same time. And the list just goes on of everything that a typical entrepreneur is. And I realized that's how most entrepreneurs are. So I needed to find the right person who fit my characteristics. And also, the book sets up a structure and how to do it. And there was Segal, who works in my company, who's been here for, I think, 7 years now. I realized she was the perfect person. So we instituted the Scaling Up structure and then the Visionary Integrator last year. which now she's the only person who reports to me. And her job as integrator is to make sure if I have 100 ideas, she's like, thanks, Dave. That's great. Let's just do these 3 for now. Because she helps me integrate my ideas versus me giving it to the whole company and them feeling and trying to do them all at once. So that's how we're able. I hope that it was a long answer, but it was a really good question because I could never have done this and moved to Barcelona 3 years ago. It would have been the end of the company, probably.
Well, I think, and I'm hearing 2 things that remind me of some of the clients I'm working with now, quite frankly, is I recommend, someone like yourself, someone like myself, we have 3 lists. So we have what I call a weekly win. The win acronym is what's important now. And I got that from Solid Networks, Joe Cram over there in Modesto, California. And so that's never more than 3 things. That's the current weekly focus. Might just be 1, depending on the time commitment. But next we have a priority to-do list, prioritized to-do list. And then the 3rd list we've got is the parking lot.
Yep.
Or down in Australia, they call it the fridge. You put it in the fridge, you pull it out later, it's still fresh.
Yep.
You're always managing those 3 lists.
Yep.
And, that's
sorry.
for your, you go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's perfect. Like, cause those are very similar to everything we're doing. And it's sort of like Jim Collins, he wrote in a Harvard Business Review about core values. It doesn't matter what your core values are as long as you repeat them to the rafters. So if you have a framework that works, just as long as you keep it consistent, and that I love that framework that you just said. It's almost the same thing we have, just in different words. So it sounds like you're up the right path. And like I said before the podcast, when I met you, I don't know, 8 years ago, I was super impressed with everything you had to say and the structure that you had. So it's just awesome to be doing this podcast with you.
Oh yeah. Long overdue, but it's great.
And Jeff, your younger brother. Just kidding.
But I want to bring up this other piece of the puzzle that so many entrepreneurs overlook that you brought up, is that you had this person in your organization for 7 years. And you looked at, okay, who's the person that could really fill this role? So if I'm understanding the timeline right, that person, what was her name again?
Segal.
So Segal was overlooked 3 times.
It gets better. It gets better. So 4 years before, when our second COO left, Segal came up to me and said, if you want, I'll step up and I'll be COO. I'll do it. And what happened was the second COO who left, he essentially started his career at Lawline and didn't have management experience. And Segal didn't really have management experience yet either. And so I decided at that time I wanted to hire somebody from the outside who managed 50, 60, 70 people and bring their experience in. And the truth is, and I think Segal would agree, probably 4 years ago, she wasn't ready for it. So over the past four years, we've suffered a lot and we've had a lot of great things. And so it became clear, though, to me a couple of years ago, even before this, like, she has what it takes. And then the visionary integrator concept just gave me the toolkit to be able to do it. And look, any change, it was hard, by the way. Making this shift was not easy because you're shifting what people are comfortable with. And it took a long, it's not easy. And that's my job as visionary, like to try to make those harder decisions to keep moving the company forward. And, sometimes as visionary, you feel like bad about yourself because you're like, I'm not busy 12 hours a day, like doing. And you have to keep reminding yourself your job is not to keep doing. Your job is to like sit back and just make sure you guys are on the right track. And so my focus over the next 12 months is building my personal, in addition to the main things I'm doing for Lawline, but is building my personal brand. Because similar to many people, including Gary Vaynerchuk, says the best way to grow your business and your company is to grow your personal brand as CEO. And I see it already. It's happened. And so it's very energizing for me in the company.
Yeah. And the, your job with her is to basically have the metrics in place and you can follow up on those metrics. She's obviously doing that with you, providing some accountability so you stay focused on what's most important for the company. But it's really just the follow-up, being consistent with that on the metrics so you know where to go.
we have monthly meetings with our coach, with the entire executive team, and we set the metrics and the structures there. So we're very straightforward. But you're exactly 100% right. One of the main reasons all three other COOs' relationships failed was I had no focus. So we had literally no accountability. I had no sort of structure with them. So what happened was we ended up both being the CEO. They would say A, I would say B, literally in the same meeting. And look, at the end of the day, it was on me because I wasn't holding them accountable to anything. And the other thing was all three of them were better at me in certain things. And I just gave them this superhero status that if they're better than me than A, I'm sure they're just better at me than everything else. And so I went against my judgment a lot of times and just sort of let it go because I also didn't have the mental tools to have a tough conversation. And the book Radical Candor, you guys familiar with that book by Kim Scott?
No.
Amazing, amazing book on how to have tough conversations with people in a radical candor way, which 98% of the time we don't do. And it hurts everybody.
Well, also going back to the choice of finding someone internally. So I have this great client, and I don't think I want to mention their name just because of the sensitivity, but the owners are not always there in the business, but it's growing very rapidly. And they really wanted to go outside the organization, similar to what your approach was. I need to find somebody who's experienced in managing 50, 100, 250 people, whatever. And I said, but wait a minute, you've got this person, Zoe, who's your executive assistant, and you telling me she does everything you want her to do and does it excellently. And they said, well, yeah. And I said, well, she's your GM. Because they want a GM to run the whole thing, basically the equivalent of your COO.
Yep.
And they said, well, no, she's never managed anything for us. She really doesn't have any management experience. I said, well, she basically produces weddings for people on the side. So, she's kicking butt left and right to make that thing happen on time. She knows how to make things happen, and I'll coach her. I'll work with her.
Yep.
So they agreed to give it a trial, and they kind of, tiptoed into it, let her try part of it. And she just did fantastic. And, she's now the GM. She's got all the authority. She runs the thing. I coach her twice a month. And she's like the best student one of the best students I've ever had. She's incredible.
I've had many coaches in my life, but since I've had this executive coach work with our exec team, it would be very difficult for me to not have a coach of some sort of facilitator, because in our monthly meetings, without that coach there, you don't have that buffer that helps you guys push you guys forward and help, to your point, that decision that's right in front of their face that they don't see, that you see so obviously. You need somebody who's not running, baking the cook, not in the day to day. So you're outside and you can see themes that they can't.
Yeah, and I think I want to clarify one thing just in case we're having somebody drink Kool-Aid here. I don't want anybody drinking Kool-Aid. So I'm not saying every employee that's been with you for a long time who has a few attributes that may be attractive can move into a significant role. But when you do have someone who's totally trustworthy and shares your values for excellence and believes in and passionately in what you're doing, you can pilot things of giving them more responsibility, and you may find they can go far beyond the little box that you put them in and get them there. The other thing that I'd mentioned based on what you're saying, you're an idea guy, right?
Yep.
So there are situations where an entrepreneur such as yourself, to achieve this fast and this furious and focused objective, you actually have that coach in some of your meetings with your executive team to kind of help put the boundaries up in a respectful way so you can stay focused. And you and myself to a certain extent too, Jeff will probably vouch for this, and Jeff does this, he'll put the boundaries up where, I can go down a rabbit trail that's a great idea, but 3 years too early.
I can't tell you how many ideas we did 4 years ago and we repeated it again. literally this year, I think we're doing 3 to 4 things that we did 4 to 8 years ago that we were just too early. And look at my dad. He literally started Lawline too early. He started his TV show too early, and he just never got rid of it. And so you keep trying these things over and over again. There's a great book. It's called This Is Now. And it's about the 4 major inventions of the 20th century, like light, sound. And it talks about sound. They actually invented the recorder 40 years before they invented the ability to listen to the recorders. They were able to record the sound waves, but they had no way to play it back. And so they were 40 years too early. So it's a great point.
It's a great analogy. Jeff, you got other questions, or you want me to wrap up or ask a few more, or what do you want me to do?
No, I'm just enjoying listening to you guys back and forth. It sounds like you have a lot to talk about.
Well, so I'd like you to talk about one last thing here, maybe, because I know we can't take up too much of your time, David. But one of the things that you've done that's worked really well for you is that, and you did mention where you said, don't go alone, is you have chosen EO as an organization and some other relationships where you've been, that have really been beneficial for you. And maybe if you can talk about, I don't know that it's Rotary or something like that. I mean, EO is kind of a totally different organization. Yeah. Some people do Vistage where they do groups there. First time we met, it was a small group meeting in a home that was your EO group. I think you guys were meeting for a day and a half, 2 days. And I came in for half a day or day, whatever it was. But those groups have been critical, it sounds like, in you really feeling fulfilled in what you're doing, gaining a lot of knowledge, experience, and good feedback. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
So as an example, that same 2-day retreat that you came to speak at, there's another speaker there. Her name was Kim Addis. I don't know if you met her while you were there. And
I don't think so.
Kim was also Bruce's coach. And I ended up 3 years later having some challenges in my business with my first COO. And I reached out to her and ended up hiring her. And I worked with her for years, and now we're like great friends. And she's a big part of my book about how she helped me. And so the point I'm making is one of the biggest things I've gotten from EO. Oh, by the way, my coach, Mark Green, from EO. Like, he was another referral from EO. Moving to Barcelona from EO. Everything that I've gotten that's helped me move forward, it might not be a direct A plus B equals C, but it's this relationship recommended this person, and that helped you move here. And my ROI on EO. So EO, just to give a sense to anyone who doesn't know, and it's $1 million or more in revenue to qualify to join, and it's a peer-to-peer network. So there's no solicitation. There's 57 chapters. There's 57 countries and like 300 chapters. There's about 13,000 members worldwide. It is the best organization that I've been part of, and it's helped me move forward. And I'm constantly trying to challenge myself. The one caveat is, it just like anything in life, it is what you put into it. So the best way to get the most value out of EO, 95% of the members don't do, and that's to be on the board. And then 99% of the members don't do that. It's to be president. And of course, I totally understand not all businesses are set up the way mine is, because it takes a lot of time, but it's this servant leadership. I run a board with 13 entrepreneurs who, if it's the equivalent of having $1 billion company, the level of people on that board who would be on my board. And it's such a leadership, talk about leadership experience. Geez. I travel the world for EO, meeting entrepreneurs in Panama, in Germany, in Canada, everywhere we've gone on these different conferences. And in Amsterdam, I meet these people from anywhere in the world who have the same qualities as me. I've never met them before. And so you want to be around a peer group of people, because experience share, which is the 2 key words of EO, we don't give advice. We just share experience. And so it actually, one of my inspirations of the book, I call the book One Big Experience Share of My Entrepreneur Journey. And that's why it's some sort of organization is so important to every entrepreneur because they struggle so much.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I remember my grandfather was an entrepreneur, and on my mother's side, and he did all kinds of entrepreneurial things. He panned for gold. He funded prize fighters. He did whatever. The thing he said about prize fighters was they're just like horses. All they do is eat a lot. But when he's in his mid 40s, he realized, the only thing I make money in is real estate. And so he just zeroed in on real estate, but he was very active in Rotary. He was very active in a few, one or two other organizations where he really invested and served.
Yep.
And it really fed his whole career and led to a very high level of success for him by doing
that. That's what you guys do now. I mean, you're serving entrepreneurs, you're serving business professionals. It's what you do is an amazing thing.
Yeah.
That's me kissing up to you guys.
I hate to end on that note. So one last note you want to give our audience before we sign off? Because I think there's been a ton of great stuff here, David. I really appreciate it. Now, I noticed your book is not released until May 8th.
So it's for pre-orders now. So if it's just going live today, there's a link, if you don't mind, Jeff. It's the Amazon page just to buy, if they want to buy, anyone who's interested. And I'll leave on this. Ultimately, everybody I know, at least in their 40s right now, and everyone even in their 20s, they just want to live they know they live their life to their full potential, whatever that means for them. And so what I would say is what's most important for that, people who are most successful, and there's a lot of research on this, is if you write down a goal, right, you're 3 times more likely to hit it. If you write down a goal and have a plan, you're 10 times more likely to have that. But with all that said, if you don't do that, taking action is fine by me. If you take action without a goal and without plans, you just keep taking action, that's totally great. You're gonna have impact. You just won't have as much impact if you had more focus. But that's totally fine as well. So my number one thing I would leave people with is if you feel like you want to live with no regrets and there's things that you want to do, start taking action on them and you will start moving forward. And then buy the book, obviously, and that will take you the rest of the way.
Sounds good. Okay. I have ordered my copy.
Wow. Thank you.
Great, David. Well, how can people get in touch with you or find out more about Lawline?
Yeah. So lawline.com, if you want to get in touch with me there. I have a website, davidschnurman.com, that will take you to me. And if you just Google my name, it's Instagram, David Schnurman, Facebook, David Schnurman, LinkedIn, David Schnurman. So easy to spell. I'm sure everybody knows off the top of their head.
Yeah.
Or you know what? If you've gotten this far and you really want to ask me a question, just email me directly, David@Lawline, LAWLINE.com. Happy to help anybody out who really is trying to grow.
Great. Thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Jeff, David, love that you guys are working together. Seriously, it's really awesome. There's nothing better actually than what you guys are doing. So keep enjoying it. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, thanks. Great to have you.
Later.